All right, welcome to the OpenJ9 Hangout. Just a reminder to please add your name and affiliation to the list of attendees so we know everybody who's joined. All right, and going over the agenda, the first item we have is managing the OpenJ9 issues list. Irina, have you had a chance to update this?
So partially. So what I've done, I went through all those queries and I updated the change from last time when we updated it. So you got, the open issues, the test failures, the JEPs, enhancements, and so on. So all those queries are updated, how we work compared to last week. You also said we should have a new user raised. I've done a quick query for that. And you wanted a breakdown for JDK. I don't have that yet. I'll have that for next time.
Okay. All right, so make this a little easier to track to do breakdown by JDK. So we highlighted a couple of things that we would see as an issue as growth without bounds. I'm not sure I'm seeing that in any of the areas. Is anybody looking at the changes in open items, seeing anything that's particularly concerning to them? Or anything that they think we should be digging into deeper?
Kind of early to talk about this.
Well, although no single category of the subcategories seems to be going up much, I do notice that the overall figure at the top is up around, I don't know, 25%, which might be a bit of a quick increase, though I don't know over what period the up from is being done with respect to whether it's a week ago or 3 months ago.
I don't think we had the issues list updated last week. So
That's correct.
Have the data for you. I don't recall when the last time this was updated, if it was last week or the week before.
That would be probably 3 weeks ago, at least 3 weeks ago.
Well, I guess we just keep our eye on it, but it's I guess, up there for in about 20% in 3 weeks. So that may be an issue. If it doesn't come down again, it will for a while.
All right. If there's no further comments on the issue queries, then I think we can move to our release mechanics. So the release candidate 2 has also been created for the 0.8 release. My understanding is this is being built at adopt now. We've tagged the release candidate as the RC2 tag, and we're waiting on working with adopt to work out all the issues around how to test this and how to validate the testing, including JCKs. It's very disconcerting to watch things disappear as I'm reading them. Just make a note that we're working with adopt to validate the release candidate build so it can be retagged, final tag.
So if you want a bit more status over from adopt land, where I've just come from in another window, the JCK automated tests at least have run against this release candidate build, and we've got a clean run on one platform, and they're looking at, they seem to be environment failures on 390 and on Power LE, VPC LE. So we're in a position to start running the interactives on the release candidates, but I've discovered there that we don't have a VNC kind of facility on the JCK test machines over there to actually run the test, so we're now working on resolving that.
Okay. Is there a timeline on when we believe these will be complete?
We were hoping the end of this week, but I'm suspecting with the VNC problem that may not now be realized.
I know that there's a certain number of people needed to do the interactive tests. Have we identified people to do those tests?
So I volunteered to be the first one. Since I wrote the instructions, I'll try and follow them myself first. So that was for x86 I'll do first. So assuming that goes reasonably well, I'll call for another couple of volunteers to do the other platforms.
Okay. All right, so opening that up to the call, if there are people who are able and willing to run some JCK interactive tests, the more volunteers we have, the faster we can run through this.
Yeah, just able, I think, is all you need to say, Dan. I don't think we need willing.
All right. So in terms of machines, unless there was anything further on that particular topic?
There's one other thing which might come back to bite us a little. The fact that we'll be JCKing the release candidate and not the final build is something that I certainly overlooked when we put that together. But I'm trying to get confirmation that that's acceptable to open the Adopt Home JDK project. They haven't come back with a final, yes, that's okay or not. But we may need to look at how can we make it so that the release candidate tag is optimistic, such that if it does pass all the tests, then we can just immediately ship that build. It's probably, I think it's something we should come back and look at again, see whether we can facilitate that, thereby not putting ourselves through this ambiguity.
So this discussion is ongoing at Adopt?
Yeah, well, I'm basically waiting for a response from Adopt. The last I heard, it was going to be put back with the question raised at with the JCK compliance team, which I imagine must be Oracle.
All right. Is there anything else that we want to discuss around release mechanics? All right. Moving on to discuss machine. I know that we've recently enabled the AIX machines. So a big thank you to everybody involved in that work. There's more names that I'm worried I'm going to miss somebody, so I'm going to avoid calling out particular names, but all the work involved in that is very appreciated, and I know that we've been able to enable the first set of tests on those machines as of last night, so that's a great step forward. Is there any other updates on machine access?
I haven't heard from Charlie any more progress on the UNV side, but I guess we're still hoping to make that happen.
The only update I've heard from Charlie has been that I believe they've worked out the VPN issue. We'll have to reach out to Charlie and see if we can get that. All right. There's nothing else on machines. And let's move on to end user experience. I'm getting a lot of background noise. Is everybody who isn't speaking on mute? So end user experience. I know that we've seen recently a couple of articles from users of OpenJ9 who've talked about how they've been able to use it for microservices and for just the general performance improvements they've been seeing. So that's, you know, great user feedback. Others, other examples here that we should be calling out?
I guess there hasn't been any response to any of my entreaties to get people to join this call to talk about their experiences. But like I said, I was just doing a random Google search yesterday and came across a couple of links for articles that people had just randomly written that we hadn't been aware of. I'm kind of wondering if we might want to find a way to highlight those on the website, or like some way of I don't know, being able to link to articles as we find them that are talking about it, OpenJ9.
Might be a good use for the OpenJ9 Twitter account, or are you thinking of something more long-lasting than that?
Well, yeah, I guess kind of like having a record on the website of people who are using OpenJ9 and things they've said about it, I think is still valuable. It's kind of like an additional resources.
All right. Sue, are you on the call?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep. Is that something that you could take on? Is building a page that...
Put it down for me and I'll have a think about how we can integrate it.
Okay. Thanks, Sue. All right. I'm seeing somebody's marked a particular issue as something we should discuss here. I'm just going to pull the link up to that now. Automating the build instructions using Ansible. So who's tagged that in the issue, and what would they like to discuss?
So this is Peter. I tagged it. It's just been a pull request that somebody submitted that's been sitting for quite some time without comment. And I know it's an at-test discussion. I think you mentioned, Dan, you're wondering if it's something we wanted to accept in the project. So I thought it would be a possible subject we could discuss here.
So reading the issue, it seems to be some instructions on how to build using Ansible. I think my initial question about it had been how it related to our existing Docker files, and was it a complete replacement for or integrated in some way into that?
So I think this is a guy who wrote one of the articles that I was linking to, I think. And so I think if I understood that article correctly, I believe it was kind of trying to automate more of the build process for people who don't want to type in all the commands to build stuff from it creates the Docker container and then runs all the build steps kind of automatically for you using the playbook. Maybe it's more than that. I haven't reviewed the pull request at all, but that was kind of what the article was around. sort of an additional simplification for people who are doing a particular kind of thing.
Okay. Is it something we would be able to test and validate to ensure it continues to work if we move it?
Do we test and validate the current Docker images? I mean, Docker files.
That's a good question. Just gonna record that in the notes somewhere because that should be.
So I think this sounds like a useful extension to me, because it's kind of when we originally created the Docker image or the Docker files and put it in the project, a lot of people were trying to extend it and add things to it to make it do the things that this this pull request does. So I think to me, it sounds like a reasonable thing to consider adding into the project. But I agree, having some way to automatically validate it would be a good, like, it would be nice to keep it up to date and make sure that it keeps working as opposed to go stale and crap to it and nobody knows about it. It's kind of an onboarding simplification, right?
Right now, are there other Ansible playbooks or Ansible scripts at OpenJ9?
Not that I'm aware of. I believe most of the Ansible work has been done at Adopt.
Yeah. Is this change or this script better served by living at Adopt?
So I think the purposes for the two things are different, or at least the goals of the playbooks are different. The ones that Adopt are meant as a reliable, this is how we're going to build the production version of JDK X with OpenJ9. And I want to build it and test it and make sure that it works properly. I think this use case is more aimed at, I'm a developer who's interested in working with Eclipse OpenJ9, and I just want a simplified environment for getting up and running and to start playing with either running it on my application or and I want to work from the open source code base. So I'm interested in developing with OpenJ9, as it were.
Right. So this pull request requires someone having Ansible installed on their machine, and then it helps them build OpenJ9.
Presumably, yes. So again, like I said, I haven't reviewed the pull request at all, but I would guess that there's some documentation aspect that we would want to add or make sure is there so that people know how to use this thing once it's there. But yeah.
That made me think that, I don't know how well advertised it is, that if you do a build like this at OpenJ9, you're not getting the same things that you get when you take a build from Adopt, because Adopt adds in a few extra components.
Like what?
Graphical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be that most people don't care.
Mm-hmm.
They're just looking to use OpenJ9 as a server environment, but something that would be worth documenting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's true of any automated way of building OpenJDK as well. But I agree, we should make that clear.
Okay. So it sounds like we have some feedback for the developer. We'll need to do some testing on this pull request, but the approach sounds like a reasonable way to be building OpenJ9, something reasonable for the project. All right. Are there other user-raised issues we should discuss? All right. Moving to the next release after 0.8. This one I am again remiss in. I need to send this to the list. What I have been doing has been creating some projects on the GitHub page. So on the OpenJ9 repo, there's a way to create GitHub projects, and I've been creating some of these to track areas that I and my team locally have been focused on. So Nestmates, Valhalla, Nestmates, Constant Dynamic, and this morning I created one for the focused work around Docker. It's just an easier way to group particular sets of issues together and to say these are areas we're focused on. Any committer is able to create one of these projects. So this may be a good way to capture related sets of issues and items that we're working on in these focus areas. So I will send out a note to that effect today. Are there other particular issues that we want to discuss on for the next release? All right. And then moving on to how to advertise this call. Last week, just after the call ended, Mark had a great suggestion that we should rebrand this call as the Ask the OpenJ9 community call. Rather than the somewhat current status meeting that we've been running, if we started it and rebuilt this call around a opportunity for people who are interested to engage with the OpenJ9 community, we might get more user participation. Anybody have thoughts on that or concerns about rebranding this call?
It's a good idea.
I think as long as we don't lose anything from it in terms of the goals that we have, it should be all right. I did notice that this one wasn't on the Twitter feed, but one of the previous ones were.
Yeah, I'm the one running the Twitter feed, and I'm not always good about updating it with the Hangout calls.
Yeah, what do people think the best way to do that is? Like, should we be tweeting a couple of days early so that people have it in their heads that this is coming up? Should we be tweeting the morning of, I guess, Eastern Standard Time, morning of? Or even
I would generally say that with the way most people use Twitter, I wouldn't do it more than half an hour before the call, personally. If it's the way I use Twitter, I wouldn't pay any attention to it unless it was in that sort of timescale.
Yeah, I would have said an hour, but I agree.
Okay. So maybe, Dan, you could set a reminder on your calendar for an hour before the before the meeting, and then tweet it out and we can retweet.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, we can always drive the agenda differently on each meeting, but I guess if we're gonna make it a user-centered meeting, maybe we can have that content at the beginning of the meeting. Like, any external people that show up, they kind of have the floor to start the meeting off, and then we can always back end it with the pieces of this, like the release level stuff and the machines, which probably aren't all that interesting to most external people, but are interesting to at least some subset of the people who are currently listening to the call. So that we can, we don't, as Stuart says, we don't lose those pieces that are useful for us.
Do we have a limit on how many people we can have on the Zoom call? I know we've had that issue with Adopt OpenJDK and the use of Google Hangouts.
we have a time limit on the length of the Zoom calls. I think we're get cut off at about 30 to 45 minutes, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I think 45 is the default. Yeah, but is there a limit on the number of participants? I think we're up to 10 now. I think that was the limit we had by default on Hangouts.
I think the limit is 100 for Zoom.
That's fine then.
So the other piece of material we should be including in these calls may be short 5 to 10 minute presentations on areas that are of particular interest. I know we've talked about releasing blogs and video on the OpenJ9 website. It may be useful to put short descriptions of upcoming features, or how to work with OpenJ9, a demo of some particular thing in this call. As they're recorded, it should be easy to share that info.
Yeah, and I had an action from the last meeting for some test related stuff. We've done the recording, but I'm not happy with the audio quality, so we're going to re-record audio on it. Should be able to do that this week. And then Sue pointed me at how I would incorporate that into the OpenJ9 website. So hopefully we can get to that soon.
Yeah, again, if you're talking about sort of putting small presentations and so on onto this call, then advertising it as like lightning talks and putting out ideas, something on the Twitter feed, even asking for suggestions for it might be a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, actually. Asking people what they want to see.
Yep.
So I mean, there are a few obvious things we could use to seed the list if nothing comes down the pipe right away from that technique. I mean, I think there's been a lot of widespread interest in kind of the shared classes and the AOT. It's a pretty hot topic in the Java ecosystem as a whole. So and we haven't done an amazing job of talking about how to actually use that stuff at a kind of user level, really, right? I mean, the articles that are most relevant there, I think, are from 2008. So a lightning talk around, getting your app going with shared classes, a lightning talk around, issues with AOT or how AOT works in your app, just to give people a flavor of how it's operating.
Exactly, just anything to say, this is how you use it, this is how you enable it, and here's the benefits you can get from it. If we can show them some sort of monitoring that shows the advantage, then all the better. And that should be possible within 5 minutes, and you don't need to be too technical with it.
Right.
Even some of the dump and trace APIs, just to show a quick example.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's one of our strengths, so we should be shouting from the hills about that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's not in the most consumable form at the moment. It's a bit complex to enable it, is the only problem. And I know we've got people working on that at the moment.
Yeah, but even just showing a couple of use cases, right? Like, you want to get a method trace, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
Record a couple of these. IoT, shared classes, trace.
Actually, there's another, when we talked about open sourcing J9, not when we actually did it, but the year before we actually did it at Java 1, we had some interaction with the JitWatch project, which is also an Adopt OpenJDK project, which kind of died off, but they thought they'd gotten it working at the time. Maybe we should revisit that, see if it's still working, and we could maybe reach out to somebody from the JitWatch and see if they want to do a joint thing on how JitWatch works. Like, we can let them talk about JitWatch as well as JitWatch with OpenJ9. Maybe that's a longer topic, I don't know. But just trying to pull more people in to do things that might be of interest to people who are using OpenJ9, I think, is the general trend or category I'm trying to find.
I think that's a great idea. especially when it's outside projects that are collaborating with us.
And if we can get OpenWhisk to start building on top of our stuff, then maybe we can do a joint one with the OpenWhisk community as well. Fingers crossed.
All right. We are rapidly running out of time, so I will just provide an update that I've opened a pull request to document the current list of labels and their intended purposes. The link is there, so feel free to comment on that if anyone feels more detail is needed.
I'll just point out that the original suggestion was to add the list of labels to the wiki, and that's not what's being done.
Given that we haven't created a wiki yet, I thought it made sense to put it with the other process info. But people feel strongly it should be on the wiki. I don't have a particular problem with that.
Put it where people are likely to find it, I guess, is what I would say. If no one's using the wiki, then people aren't likely to look there for it.
So already I had a problem finding our build instructions. Somebody asked me where they were, and I went looking for them. I eventually tracked them down, but I started by looking in doc, and that's not where they are. They're actually in build end.
Of course.
Okay, so we may want to refactor that as well.
Do we currently have any sort of landing page for documentation of the whole project? That is something we're looking at Adopt at the moment. We've created a repository. It's currently entitled TSC, as in Technical Steering Committee, and that's going to have basically the jumping off points to all the other documentation we have for the project. It gives people an entry point because I suspect you've got the same issue as we have. We've got documentation fragmented across various different locations. We've got far too many repositories. They're not always that easy to find your way around.
I think the website does some of that, Stuart, and also I think the README, the first README you get from GitHub repo, that has quite a few connections in it as well. Probably could do a better job there.
Okay. Yep. I mean, I haven't looked at it so much for OpenJ9. It's just that's mentioning that's an issue we're having with Adopt at the moment. I know you don't have as many repositories as we do, though.
We have enough.
Yeah.
Note that our time limit is 40 minutes, so we are going to get cut off in about 2 minutes.
All right, so next call will be March 14th, 11 a.m. And we have 3 minutes left by the counter running here. So is there any last item that needs to be discussed before we call it for the week? All right, based on the general silence, I'm going to say no. Thanks, everybody, and we can pick this up again next week.
Okay, cheers, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.